That's a decision for future Nat. She gets to worry about that. Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today. And for this video, we're going to be looking at my new authors from this year and seeing whether or not I would read from them again. Alright, so before I get into anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments who is a new author that you read this year that you're excited to see more from. So this is year 2 of doing my new author audit, which is basically, as I said, looking at the authors I read from this year who are new to me, meaning I hadn't read from them in the past, and now deciding whether or not I want to read more from them in the future. This is something I actively track on my spreadsheet. However, I did actually make an effort to go through this year and remove the ones where I've already read something additional from this author later in the year. So for example, I read from Catherine Arden for the first time in February, but then I read another book by that author in like March, and then I think another one in May, I believe. That author is no longer new to me. At the time of filming this, I read 141 books this year, and 56 of those were from authors I hadn't read from previously. So obviously that's a lot of authors to go through. Excuse me if I'm a little short with some of these. For example, starting at the top with Jason Huff, who I read a thriller from at the beginning of this year. Honestly, no, I don't really see myself reading more from him. Next up is Catherine M. Valenti. I read Comfort Me with Apples by this author, and ironically, I'm actually very interested in something that's quite different. The first book I read was a horror novella, and I now have a space opera from this author on my TBR. So I do actually want to see more from her. This next author, I also have more from them on my TBR already, and that's Anna Bogotyskaya. I adored unlikable female characters, and I believe her newest book was called Feeding the Monster, and it was specifically looking at horror pop culture. Absolutely fascinated by that. Cannot wait to pick it up. Then I've got The Dark Tide by 𝗖cie Ich𝗁𝗰𝘁, and honestly, this was very much a maybe. I wasn't sure if I wanted to read more from this author, but I recently saw the cover for her newest work, and call me superficial, but I'm definitely gonna check it out. Then I have 𝗖cie Ich𝗁𝗰𝘁, a author who is very, very hyped, and honestly, yes, I do think I will read more from him. I really enjoyed Razorblade Tears, and I've literally heard nothing but positive things about every other work this author has put out. I absolutely will be revisiting them. I just don't know when it's gonna happen. Then I have Tati Richardson with The Build-Up. This was a smaller romance book that I read, I think for like my 5x5 in February, and I liked it well enough. I liked the creation of the characters, if I remember correctly, but I think I more had an issue with the plot of what was going on and the way certain tropes were being utilized in the romance. So I do think I would read more from this author, but it might depend on like what tropes she's playing with. Then there's Joel Gomez. I read The Guild of Stories by this author earlier this year, and I really appreciated the themes that she wove into the story, all topics that I do enjoy reading about, and especially through this like horrific lens. So I do think I'd be interested in this author's work, but I honestly haven't dived into her backlist to see if there's anything else she's written that does intrigue me. Then I've got Victor Lavelle. This one's kind of funny because honestly, if I based this purely on my experience with the first book I read from him, Lone Woman, I'd probably say no, but I have heard about many of his other books and I've been intrigued by them, so I do think I'll check this author out again in the future. Daniel Kraus, who wrote Whalefall, maybe. I didn't feel super strongly about this book one way or another. It was a very middling read for me. I liked aspects of it, but I wish the author would have dived into a lot of them more. So possibly, but probably on the lower side of yes. Next up is Lydia Kang, who wrote a Star Wars novel, and I'm not actually sure. Most of the Star Wars authors I've read so far are repeats. Like a lot of them write numerous novels. This is one author who I've only seen once, so I'm not sure. I might possibly have to read more of her work anyway, since I'm continuing with my Star Wars canon project. Even though I liked Cataclysm, I don't remember anything especially standing out about that book because of the writing. So again, this author's like a maybe, but like I probably will end up reading more from her anyway. Next is Genevieve Gornichek. I read The Witch's Heart by her and I really enjoyed it. I do have, I think, 2 other books by this author already on my TBR. She specializes in Norse mythology. Mythology is a big buzzword for me, and I did enjoy the first book I read from her, so yes. Next up is Kristen Perrin. She came out with How to Solve Your Own Murder, and I had an arc of that earlier this year. Liked it more than a lot of cozy mysteries I've read. It just just wasn't something that like I felt incredibly strongly about. So I'd already been kind of on the fence whether or not I wanted to pick up the next book in this series. Recently was reached out to by the publisher via NetGalley to get a copy of the second book in the series. And again, like I'm still very much on the fence. I don't know. Off of my experience with the first book, I think this could be a good time, but I just don't know if it's one that like I really want to prioritize, or if like having an arc of it is going to be the driving force that makes me read it. That's a decision for future Nat. She gets to worry about that. Charles Soule, this is another author for Star Wars. Honestly, with how he wrote Light of the Jedi, if I had a choice, no. But like I said, when it comes to Star Wars authors, a lot of them repeat, so I might end up reading more from this author anyway. Next up is Natasha Bowen, who wrote Skin of the Sea, and I did like that book. There were aspects of the story I did very much enjoy. Prosy writing that this author has in the novel I read, I did enjoy. So like that aspect I do think could drive me to pick up something else from this author, but I definitely think it's going to depend on the plot. This is another author where it's very much a maybe, like it'll really depend on what she comes out with next. Ooh. Lizzie Demalola Blackburn. So I read this author's debut work, Yinka, Where Is Your Husband? This book gave me exactly what I went into it expecting. However, it's a contemporary story. It's purely contemporary. It has some small romance in it. And I just don't really care that much about character studies that are contemporaries. I rather look at them in like a fantastical element or have the romance aspect be stronger, something more. But if she purely sticks to fiction, probably not. Camilla Cole, I'm gonna just straight up say no. I didn't like the characters in her book. I did not like the way she plotted her story. I didn't really care too much for the world building, and so let them burn. So honestly, off of my experience with that book, no. That's such a shame, but oh well. Oh God, Anne Leckie. I attempted to read Ancillary Justice. I mean, I did technically read it, but like I skimmed so much of this book off of how this story was told, the alternating perspectives and timelines, AI that's like somehow both a individual being but also like part of this hive mind. It's very possible that the setup of the story in general kind of was more my issue than like the author's actual writing style. Probably not. There's lots of other sci-fi out there that's appealed to me more. I don't really think I need to dive into more works from this one author who I had such a hard time with her first book. Next up though is KT Hoffman, who wrote The Prospects, and I absolutely loved this book. I would love to see more from this author. I cannot freaking wait. I am going to be watching for whatever they come out with next. Oh God, this next one is very much a maybe. K.A. Applegate, or Catherine Applegate, who wrote The Animorphs. I read the first book earlier this year, and while I did like it, it's a very long series, and these are middle grades, so like I'm not the main audience for them. I'm not who these books were geared towards. I don't know. I do still have this series as a maybe on my series list, so who knows? But I believe she mostly sticks with middle grade and younger stories. I'm already worrying that I'm aging out of YA, let alone middle grade or younger. So if I do, it is definitely going to be an Animorphs book. Kind of riding that same wave with this next author, Micaiah Lucier. She wrote Dragon Fruit, which I was very excited going into, but honestly, this book kind of was like, I think it was Sam Donovan who said it was like a Disney movie, where it's not super shocking. None of the characters are especially jumping off the page, but like there's enough there for you to enjoy it. However, it was a 3-star for me. Like I just don't really see myself pushing through other works by this author. Probably not. Cindy J. Shields, who wrote The Honey Witch, though I did have a few issues with this author's debut work, overall I had a really positive time, so absolutely I am planning to check out more from her. Shelley Parker Chan. I attempted for a third time to read She Who Became the Sun this year. I mean, I did actually read it this time around, but I didn't love it. This author wrote certain themes in their work very well. I was really bugged by the fact that this was very much a military historical story when I was expecting a fantasy. So perhaps if like this author's future work is better marketed and maybe like they kind of continue with discussing the themes that they wove into She Who Became the Sun, they are definitely a maybe. Falls Meadows, I can already say is an absolute yes. I am planning to continue the 𝗖cie Chronicles, I think is how you pronounce the series name. I do already own the second book, so this author is a very easy yes. Daniel Jose Alder, unfortunately, another Star Wars author that I will probably have to pick up something else by him, but I did not have a good time with the first book I read from this author, and if it was purely up to me, I would say no. Kristen Lambert, who wrote The Boy in the Red Dress, I would say yes. I think the author did a great job of like balancing multiple different genres that was going on in the story. I mean, it was historical, it was a mystery, it had some queer romance. I think the author managed all three of those very well in this work, and I'd be interested in checking out more from her. I don't actually know if she has anything out. 𝗖cie迄𝘁𝗰𝘁. I do think I would. I was like so invested, and even though I did have issues when it came to like the plot, I grew so attached to the characters and the found family here that I ended up really enjoying the story. And so I definitely think if they can replicate that in another work, yeah, I definitely will pick up more from them. Stephen Rowley, who wrote The Guncle, yes, I am currently planning to read more from this author. I hope to get around to The Guncle Abroad next year, and then I do have a few of his other feel-good contemporary family stories on my TBR. T. Franklin, who was the author of Bingo Love, I would also consider checking out more from. I think she actually writes for, I don't know if it's Marvel or DC Comics, but I believe she writes for a comic company now. So that would absolutely be something I'm willing to check out. Paul Tremblay, this was an author I was a little nervous to try because he seems to be very divisive. And after reading Horror Movie, I can kind of understand why, but I am very intrigued, particularly by A Head Full of Ghosts. So I do plan to look at more of this author's work. Similar vein, Gwendolyn Kist, also a horror author who has many other books. I liked Haunting of Velkwood, but I've never been especially driven to pick up any of her other stuff. However, I liked the writing done in Velkwood, so I do think I would read more from her work. Once again, I think it's just going to depend on the book that's being sold to me. Keeping on with the horror books, Nick Medina, again, yes, I would read more from this author. I do already have another book from him on my TBR, so very easy, yes. Nathaniel Philbrick, who wrote In the Heart of the Sea, yes, but I'm gonna add an asterisk. I think, again, it would very much depend on like what the story is, seeing as how this was a nonfiction book. And like if the topic of the story is not something I'm interested in, then I probably wouldn't pick it up. But I would be open to looking at whatever other work he has done. Next is Mila Nix, who I actually have multiple of her books on my TBR already. So yes, obviously, definitely would be willing to check out more from her. One of those being to continue a series. So yes, I am going to check out more from her. I can say the same for this next one, Bethany Bennett. I actually just recently in a holiday trade ended up with the first book in her oh crap, I don't remember the name of the series, but the romance series that I started from her. So absolutely will be reading more from her. Then I've got Essie Dennis. I read Queer Body Power by this author and really enjoyed it. I liked the mix between factual evidence and then personal anecdotes, plus including anecdotes from other individuals that they interviewed. I actually ended up following them on Instagram and I really enjoy everything they create. So absolutely, I would look at anything else this author writes. This next one is kind of spoiled if you watched me reacting to 1-star reviews of some of my favorite books for the year. Monica Kim. I loved The Eyes Are the Best Part, so abso-freaking-lutely I am going to be keeping my eyes peeled for what this author comes out with next. Right around here was when I started into my Buns N' Roses TBR jar, so there were a lot of new to me romance authors that we're gonna dive into. Starting out with Harper St. George, I think I would honestly. The book I picked up from her is definitely a smaller one. It's a Harlequin romance and it's on the older side. So I think I would read more from this author because I liked her actual writing style and I definitely enjoyed the way she created characters, but I think I'd just be a little pickier about what book I decide to pick up next from her. Then is Jenny Kiefer, who wrote This Wretched Valley. This got a lot of divisive reviews and unfortunately I kind of was on the negative side. I liked the idea of the story, but I hated the way this author ended up plotting everything out and certain twists that they ended up doing I just didn't really enjoy. So no. Another Buns author, Cecilia Renee. I loved the first book I read by her, and whenever I went to the actual Buns N' Roses event, I ended up buying the first book in that series. So yes, I will be reading more. And I'm gonna also give a very emphatic yes to Sengu Madonna. I loved Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. In fact, I'm mad at myself that I took so long to get to it. So yes, I absolutely will be reading her next book. Another Buns author with 𝗖cie his𝘁⁰ I would say yes. However, I'm actually a little more intrigued by her historical mystery series that I've seen. I think I might try one of those next. Deb Marlowe is also a Buns author and kind of in the same vein. I liked that she did some mystery alongside the historical romance, and so I actually would be intrigued to see if the rest of her stuff kind of has a similar thing, or at least like the rest of the series that I read. Next was also a Buns author, but this is actually a mystery, and it was Lucy Conley. Honestly, no. The way this cozy mystery was done was very much not for me. I mean, cozy mysteries in general are not for me, but there were certain choices done in the story that I just did not enjoy, did not agree with, so no. Suzanne Farrell, maybe. Portions of her writing that I did enjoy. I definitely think if I decide to pick something else up by this author, I will go for something that is not multiple perspective, either single perspective or like dual perspective with the love interest. The way she did multi-perspective with the book I read just did not work for me. It very much took me out of the story. I'm really messed with the pacing that also affected my enjoyment, so maybe. Another Buns author, Angelina M. Lopez, is a very excited yes. I really enjoyed the second book in her series that I read, and I actually ended up buying the first book at the Buns N' Roses event, so yeah, that'll happen. I also am saying absolutely, definitely happening to Crystal Sutherland. I loved The Invocations, and I've heard a lot of positive things about House of Hollow, so I guess I really need to pick that one up, and hopefully I will enjoy it just as much as I did her first work that I read. Another Buns author that I tried was Nancy Nagel, and she's a no for me just because this was very much a Hallmark story. Like most of her works are very much Hallmark stories. That is not my taste. That is not my preference. So this one is just very much like she is not the author for me. Ooh, this next one's kind of hard. Claire Coda. I had very mixed feelings about woman eating. And so I do think I would be willing to try something else by this author because I enjoyed the nuance in her story and how she mixed together themes. But I also had some issues with that book. And so like this one is very much a maybe. It would probably depend on the book, what the main focus of it is. Sam, that was not nice. You did not need to kick her out of that chair. Carly Bloom, who wrote 𝗖cie his𝘁⁰ I'm giving a definite yes. I had so much fun with that book. I'm gonna continue to sell it as Sabrina the Teenage Witch meets Dial A for Aunties by Jessie Q. Sutanto, and I just had such a phenomenal time with it. It was such a silly, good, vibey time, so absolutely I will be reading more from her. Ooh, okay, next is S.A. Barnes, who wrote Dead Silence that Josh and I read this year, and I'm gonna say yes. I'm also gonna say yes for Josh because I know he enjoyed it too, and I've already been considering trying to make him read, I think it's Ghost Station, which was their next work, sometime next year, probably in October. Ooh, this next one, I actually kind of already touched on this in my November wrap-up, but Kayla Cottingham. I think this author can write gore very well, and I enjoyed the representation that was done in This Delicious Death. This being YA though, definitely dropped my enjoyment. I just did not enjoy these characters. They read very young for me, and so I think if she came out with an adult horror story, I would say yes. But like, it's very much dependent on the age range. I'm also very unsure with this next author, Cassandra Khaw. I liked the idea behind The Salt Grows Heavy, but the actual execution just was not for me. And unfortunately, the issue that I had with that book, I've heard a lot of very similar complaints when it comes to their other work, so pretty unlikely, honestly. But a horror novella author that I absolutely will be reading more from is Caitlin Marceau. I really enjoyed This Is Where We Talk Things Out, which I read in November, and I'm absolutely going to check out more from her. And the same can be said for Emily Varga. I loved, absolutely devoured For She Is Wrath. I cannot wait to see what more she comes out with. I believe this is our last Star Wars author for the year, John Jackson Miller. I would say maybe. I'm not actually sure if he has other Star Wars works written just because his name wasn't as familiar to me. Really did not like how he did the multiple perspectives in this book. There was just way too many. I don't know if that was a him decision or a Disney decision. Apart from that though, I did like his writing style. I thought he stuck true to a lot of characters who already had established voices in, say, the films or the TV shows. So I think I'm gonna say yes. And like I said, I might end up reading more from him anyway with my canon project. And finally, the last new to me author this year was Isabel Ibanez. And this is a complicated answer. I'm gonna say yes, I am absolutely going to be reading more from this author because I already bought her second book in the Secrets of the Nile series. So yes, I will be reading more from her. After this series, however, I'm not sure. It is really going to depend on how my experience with the second book in the series goes. So yes, but like there's a caveat. All right, and that is officially it, y'all. So thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, leave me the writing emoji in the comments. I have all my socials as well as a few ways you can support me linked in the description. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye.